Hey Photoshop users, today we are going to create a wine bottle or a clear wine bottle using mostly curves and adjustment layers. So you can see here how I have started this off. I've got background and then basically just a bunch of adjustment layers to help create the highlights and values and stuff. And the nice thing about this technique is if we wanted to change the background, I just have a hue, saturation, bright hue and saturation adjustment layer here. So as I adjust this background, you'll see that everything else kind of adjusts and it still maintains that clarity or that clear glass look, clear liquid in the bottle. So versus making shapes and filling them with colors and trying to coordinate it that way, I have just used adjustment layers, and like I said, mostly curves, to change the luminosity of our backgrounds and stuff so that it maintains that clear glass look. So, alright, we're going to try to start this off. So I'm going to turn off some of these layers so that we can see kind of the progression of how this was created. So as you turn it off, you'll kind of see the things kind of disappear. So the first thing I did was I just created a background and then applied a hue saturation adjustment layer above that, and that's right down here. So as we go up into our properties and change the values, we can change the background color to our taste. Alright, no big deal. And then I wanted to have some sort of like a light source shining down on my table. In photography, you would have some sort of light source above, possibly. So I just create that with my adjustment layer curves. Alright, so how I did that was I would just come in here and create an ellipse. So I'm just going to create an ellipse, and then I would come down here into my adjustment layers, right down here, and I would just create a curves adjustment layer and brighten that. Now you see how this is really harsh, but we can go in and soften that, or we could have feathered that selection first. I'm just going to go in here and click on my adjustment layer mask, and I'll come up here and go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and then we can kind of change that to make it look like a hard light if we want to, a little bit softer light, or a real soft light. Alright, so that's how I created some sort of lighting texture back there. And once again, if I go in here and change my color of my background, you'll see that I don't have to change that light source, because it's just all we're doing is affecting the luminosity levels of our layers and stuff. Adjustment layer, only an adjustment layer. We'll go on to the bottle. So now we talk about bottles and how do you make that selection of that bottle. And you can make the bottle shape however you want. We could use the pen tool and create a bottle. I tend to, and I think on this project I wanted to just see if I could create it with just my selection tool. So I started off with a rectangle, and then I added an ellipse down here. And remember, if we use our space bar, we can move that up into position. Okay, so I just held down shift to add that selection. I'm going to hold down shift again and make another selection up here, holding down space bar. didn't get it quite. You just kind of have to play around with this, move it, get it right where you want it. Okay, and then I would grab my rectangular marquee. Oops. Hold down Shift to add to, space bar to move it. See, when I hold down that space bar, I get to move that into position. Alright, so that's how we can create a very simple bottle, and then we could subtract. We can grab our ellipse tool, and this time hold down Option. You'll see that your little cursor turns into a minus, and I could cut out kind of like the top of that bottle. And we want to try to keep this ellipse down here and our top ellipse the same type of shape. Okay, so there, that's the shape of my bottle. And then I would go in here and I would save that selection because we're going to be using that over and over and over. So I'm going to say Save Selection, and we'll call this Bottle 1. Alright, so let's call it Bottle Main. Hit Save. And then while it's selected, I will come down here and add a Curves Adjustment layer. And then as I adjust this curves adjustment layer, you'll see that bottle come into view. Okay, and you can adjust it however you want to. If you want to have kind of like a dark bottle or a lighter bottle. Alright, so that's how I got started. And then I might come in here and select that, so I can just command click on that. And I might come in here and say select, modify, contract. And we're going to contract. We want to show kind of thickness on that bottle, so we're going to contract that by 2 pixels. And then I would create maybe a new curves adjustment layer. And if we take that darker or brighter, you'll kind of see, we go a bit darker, you'll kind of see that edge, and we really didn't get it thick enough, but you can kind of see how that edge gets brighter. We can kind of see the thickness of that glass. Okay, and so that's how I did this up here. I made my selections, got my bottle nice. Now you might, like I said, you might, to be more exact and perfect, you might want to use the pen tool to create this, the actual bottle. So on this one, let's turn that layer off. I actually filled this with black. So if I turn off my layer mask, you'll see that I filled this layer with black. And then I went in and added a layer mask. And then contracted, and we'll go, how about 5 pixels? So I contract 5 pixels. I think I even actually went more than that on this. Let's select, modify, contract, and we'll go 10 pixels and see what happens. Yep. So for this one, I filled it with black. So I filled that layer with black. I contracted it 10 pixels. And then came in here and filled that with, on my layer mask, filled that with black. Okay? So then that kind of hid everything here on the side, just giving me this just black outline. Okay? So then I went and loaded my main And that's the nice thing about this is you can just command click on these layers as we go. Command clicking will actually load those layers. So if you click on a thumbnail, you're loading the layers, the layer mask, or if you click on the actual layer, you'll load the actual shape of that layer. Alright, so then I went back to my main bottle selection, and it looks like I filled this with a red color, a gradient. And then I put on this layer mask. So I filled the background with black, and then where the white's showing through, I will be able to see the red color that I have. And where it's black, it's going to hide. So go down here and turn off this background. We'll see that a little better. So that's kind of what I have for this red layer here. And we'll change this back to a different color back there. How about that? Alright, so then I wanted to go in here and put some liquid. So I need to indicate that there's liquid in my bottle. So how I did that was I made an ellipse circle shape, and then just added or turned that in to click on my curves. So now if I darken it, we can make it dark, or brighten it, we can make it brighter, and that's kind of the top fluid level of my wine bottle. And then I just loaded this selection, which is our main bottle selection. So I would command click down here, and then I would just create a curves layer. So I'd have my selection, I'd come down here, create a curves adjustment layer, and then just adjust it to the taste. So if we brighten it or darken it. And once again, we're just using adjustment layers. We can always go back in and change these or adjust these if we want to. We can turn them on, turn them off. So if I think that this light source is too bright, then I'll turn that off. And the same thing with shadows now. So now that I have shadows, I can start building my shadows. So I simply made an ellipse, kind of the shape of my bottom, using spacebar to move it into position. Okay, and for this one I create a new layer, and I'll fill that with black. And then I'm going to modify that, so I'm going to modify contract, and we'll say about 20 pixels. And then I'm going to mask this out. So all I want is that outside rim. So I'll just come down here, and with that selected, I will add a layer mask. And there is my rim. And then I can come in here and soften that if I want to. So we'll go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And we can just filter that to taste. Okay, so that's how I kind of did both of my shadows to kind of create some sort of a base to my bottle. And then created this shadow. So this shadow was created by command clicking on my actual shape of my bottle. Or actually, we can just kind of go in here and load. So we could load our main shape that we saved. So I could say OK. Oop, that's not the one I want. That's the one we created. I'll just come in here in my bottle and I'll command click on my bottle. Add a new layer. I'm going to fill that with black. And then I'll transform that. Now when we hit transform, if we hold down command, we can actually pull this bottle down, and holding down command allows us to move these individual points. And we're just trying to get it close to the shape of the bottle. And then I would put a blur on this. So we're going to go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And then I'll turn the opacity down just by tapping my number keys at the top of my keyboard, 7, 8, 2, 3. So you just kind of decide. And then once again, I don't like how this shadow is down here in my the bottom of my bottle. So I could just create a layer mask here by choosing my elliptical marquee, making a selection, and then click it, get to our black being our background, and now I'll click on my what you want to do is you want to fill that with black, that circle. Now that shadow is out here, but it's not underneath. Okay, and as we go up, I did another shadow. Just going to turn that off and turn my original shadows on where they were soft. And then we have another adjustment layer up here. So if we go back down and I command click on my bottle, that's going to load that as a selection. I just kind of keep doing this. And we want to get this shape. So I'm going to command click on this layer. I'm going to modify, so we're going to contract by 20 pixels. That'll work. And then we are going to come down here and I'm going to use my elliptical marquee, and I'm going to, this time I want to try to eliminate this bottom part, so I'm going to try to do that with a intersect. So if I draw here using my space bar to move it around, I should be able to select just that intersection part. And that didn't work. I want the intersection tool up here. Try that again. Rather than subtracting, I want to take the intersection and I'll click like that, and now I have this shape up here. So it's just a matter of trying to add to selections, subtract from selections, or your intersection with selection. And since I have this shape now, I would add a curves. And that's what I did right here. So there's my curves layer with my layer mask on, and here's my mask. Alright, so we're starting to get the basics of our bottle, and now we'll move on to our, looks like we have liquid, so we need to brighten up that liquid area. Let's see, we already talked about this. Let's go into reflections. So then I start to add reflections in here. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come down here on our bottle and load it. So command clicking. You see how easy this is? And we're just automatically always coming down and using these selections that we've already made over and over and over. And so if we wanted to make this shape, we've got this shape selected, and we'll use our marquee tool, and I'll hold down Option. So we're going to subtract from this. And remember that space bar technique that we used. We just want to try to get close to our shape. So I'm going to let go, something like that. Now I have this shape. I want to be inside that folder, and then create an adjustment layer. And as I adjust this, you'll see that that selection gets brighter and brighter and brighter, or darker and darker and darker, depending on how you want to go with it. Alright, so that's what I did. So we've got this shape, kind of brightens up the liquid, and then we kind of have an overall darkening of the bottle, and then we have kind of some reflections up here. And I can kind of show you what each one of these, so there's that selection, and that was simply made from this selection, and then we just kind of start whittling away. So if I hold down Option, I can subtract. So I'll get that kind of shape. And then I could intersect. And get that kind of shape, and then I could subtract. And these are kind of just some of the simple selection tools that we've talked about. And then so once I have that selection made, if I come down here and make a curves adjustment layer and brighten that up, now you'll see how I have created that kind of that illusion of softbox on the side and reflecting glass in there. And if you didn't need to make it darker, you just pull that down. So darker, lighter, and we're still just using only adjustment layers. Okay. Alright, so that's how we did reflections. And then we're going to turn on the bottle top. And once again, we have used just our simple shape of our bottle to to make these shapes appear for the actual bottle top. So how would we do that? Well, first off, we want to go ahead and select that, so we'll make that as our selection. And then I'm going to subtract from that selection. So I'm going to hold down Option, and we'll just subtract this part. Something like that. And then I'm going to hold down Shift to add to it. And you probably want to be zoomed into this a little more than I am. So I would zoom in, make sure that I'm getting everything right. And now we need to cut out this top part, so we're going to hold down Option to subtract from. And that's why we hit so hard early on how to do these simple selection techniques. Alright, so this I'm going to then fill, I think, with a gradient. So we'll hit G, and let's just pull this simple, I think I used a red. Click on this, and I just pull. Once I create a new layer, we can pull this and create that gradient, right like that. Okay, so there's the top of our bottle. Now we need to see down inside the bottle, so I'm going to make an ellipse. Spacebar to move it in position. And then I will add a curves just to brighten that up a little bit. Just to make it look like it's in a bottle. Kind of the inside of a bottle. And I left, and once I have these masks here, we can come over here and move that to get it so that there's a nice thickness of that glass. And if we want to bump it up, we can use our arrow keys to bump it up or down. Alright, so that's kind of the opening of my bottle. Alright, so we kind of have the top of the bottle. Need a label. Alright, so now we started putting this label on, so we'll see what that involves. I think once again I would come down here and load my bottle. And then I'm going to subtract. So I'll grab my marquee, my elliptical marquee, hold down Option, and try to subtract from this shape, the shape of my label. And I'm kind of going quick here just to give you an idea of how we're making these selections. I don't like that. So how about if we just, we'll do this here. Spacebar to move it into position. So I'm going to subtract that, and then I'm just going to make a big subtraction here like that. Holding down Option turns our selection into the minus. I'm going to cut this off by holding down Option to subtract. Grab my elliptical and add this time. So we'll add just to get the bottom of this label. And it's a little different than what I have drawn. Alright, so just using simple, and you can use pen tool if you want. I'm just trying to see if I can't do this all in with just my selection tools. And I think that was my approach. So that's how I made my selection, and then I made a new layer. Made a new layer, and we'll call this label. And then I think I pulled a gradient across here. So let's just pull a, let's pull this kind of orange gradient across there. Okay, so that's how I made my label. Once again, we're using just our initial shape of our bottle, and then adding to, subtracting, or intersecting by those simple primitive selection tools. Alright, make sure you save it, save it, save it. Alright, so we kind of have a label wrapping all the way around it. Let's go ahead and see if we can't put a label with type on it. If I can figure out where things are at here. Alright, so here is my wine label that I actually put onto this. And you could create this outside here by, we'll create a new layer. And we're just going to grab a rectangular marquee. And let's go ahead and pull a gradient. We'll fill that with a gradient. Yeah, we'll pull that same color, pull that across. And then we're going to put type on it. So most of you should know how to put type on your Photoshop file. Make that a little darker. We're going to make this darker. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and flatten these three images. I've got my label here. Let's drag this up. I've got my label. I've got my type. And I want to go ahead, I want to maintain these to edit if I want to, but I also want to go ahead and merge these into their own layer. You'll see this up here, it says merged. So I'm going to select those three layers, and holding down Option, I'm going to come down here and say Merge Layers. Holding down Option, and I click on that, and you'll see what happened is I maintained, or I kept this layer for editing, but it went ahead and merged those three layers into one layer. So now if I want to distort that or transform that, I can. So if I turn these layers off, but if I want to come back and do some editing, I still have maintained these layers for editing. And the trick is by holding down Option and pulling over here to merge layers. And that's what gives us that extra layer up there. So I would drag this down and get it into position. And then we would transform that. So Command T, if I transform and I click on this button up here, it's going to give me these warp modes over here, and I'm just going to choose, how about arc? And I'll click on this and I'll just drag this down. And that's why I went ahead and merged those layers, was because I wanted to merge, or I wanted to warp that type and the label together. And we'll hit enter, and then we're going to transform that, shrink it down a little bit, and we'll say OK. Now we'll see that default, or that arc, did not get it quite arced enough here at the bottom, so I'll just select that layer again. I'll hit Command T, and then I'm going to right click inside it and say warp it, and I'm just going to drag these handles down. I'm not affecting this upper part as much, but I want to just affect this bottom part here a little bit. We just want that arc to match our actual label. And I'll hit return, and that looks much better. Alright, I think we're getting pretty close. So remember, it's just about making selections, and you can make those selections however you want to. You can use your pen tool. We can come down here and command click, on any of these. Command click on our layer masks to load them and edit them, use them, duplicate them, move them. Alright, and then the final touch was just the cork. And then I think I had a cork reflection in here just to give that bottle down there a little bit more realism, like it was shining, and warped it. And that was just basically a duplication of the cork. Warped it with the transform tool. Alright, I think that's it. Oh, and then once again, if we come down here, we can always change that background. That's the nice thing about using adjustment layers, is if we change that background color, we're still maintaining that clear glass look through our wine bottle, and we're not having to go back through and change the colors of all these shapes that we've built. A lot of you like to make a selection and fill it with color, and I'm saying try to fill it with this adjustment layer, make those luminosity changes, those brightness and darkness values change, and then all those adjustment layers working in unison should create your bottle and allow you some flexibility if you want to change that background. Alright, I think we are running really long on this. I hope this helps. This is just another technique for creating the bottle. You can also use 3D Revolve if you would like to use that to do your bottle. So I hope this helps. I thank you for watching, and I will see you down the road in yet another video tutorial.